had lost their house. But we also wanted a moderator who has agency perspective. And our answer was Brad Pyle. Brad's a Eastern North Carolina native, and he is the Assistant General Counsel at the Department of Public Safety, which we all know is home to Emergency Management and the Office of Recovery and Resilience. But prior to joining the department, Brad was a staff attorney with Legal Aid, and he was working in disaster relief. Following Florence and Dorian, he helped individuals and businesses navigate insurance and FEMA and other assistance programs. So let's welcome Brad, and Brad will introduce all of our other panelists.
I was trying to figure out how to introduce myself.
Here we go.
Well, I know there's been a bunch of interesting topics today. I mean, we talked about There's been a lot of interesting topics today. We talked about ghost forests, fisheries, power, infrastructure, roads. We have I think the sexiest topic. It's, well, we've been talking a lot about insurance here. It's titled as personal risk mitigation. I know we've heard a lot about different trends that are happening with the climate. I found the fishermen, it was particularly interesting to me to hear about the things they see, and we've been looking at a lot of these, in some ways, sort of macro trends. What we're at least going to try to do now, and I know I heard some of this last night as well, is people may be wondering, what can I do in the face of all this? Can't stop these storms from coming, so what can I do day to day, year to year, to guard against these events? So this panel, in some small way, we're going to try to talk about that and options for personal risk mitigation. And so now I'm just going to go down the line to panelists and have them introduce themselves. And first we have Tim Crawley.
Hi, I'm Tim Crawley with the North Carolina Department of Insurance. My official title is Consumer Complaint Analyst. So when you've had a claim and you've had issues with your insurance company, that's who you call me. Try to translate insurance into normal people speak. Prior to coming to the state, I've been with the state for 5 years now. Prior to that, I was with a major insurance company for 14 years. I was in personal lines underwriting, and I was also a commercial claims adjuster. So I've got a smattering of different disciplines of insurance that I can pull.
My name is Jessica Gibbs. I work with the Department of Insurance as well. I am a regional director. My area is coastal northeast North Carolina, so I get a lot of the coastal counties there, as well as big ones, of course, and Hyde is actually where I live. Before that, I worked with the county as a finance director, and I've worked a couple of disasters. I worked the FEMA paperwork for Isabel, and we also worked a wildfire, Evans Road fire in Hyde County. So I've got a little bit of experience in dealing with disaster recovery.
I'm Ryan Cox. I'm owner of Insight Planning and Development. We do a lot of disaster recovery stuff on the hazard mitigation side. I am formerly of North Commerce Management, where I was in mitigation for 5 years and managed the FEMA program, Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, what's formerly the BRIC or PDM, which is now turned into BRIC program, and then also all the hazard mitigation plans in the state. So I've got very experienced on the mitigation side, but I'm also a CFM, so I know some of the flood insurance stuff. I'm stepping on y'all's toes. If you have questions on that, I can help you on that.
Well, to kick this off, and one of the things I would run into a lot, especially with individuals after a storm, is that they would say, especially when they're struggling to recover, they're like, well, I thought I had insurance. And so the first question I was going to kick this to Tim, but what exactly is having insurance, and especially in the context of living in a coastal community, what does that look like?
Well, the coastal community presents some additional challenges of us living inland. I live in Raleigh, so I don't really have to worry too terribly much about having a wind and hail policy or having a flood policy. So here at the coast, you have to have a home policy. Most companies will exclude wind and hail, so then you have to chase the wind and hail policy down, usually through the NCIUA, the coastal or beach plan. And then if your home is, if you have a federally underwritten loan like FEMA or like Freddie Mac or one of those type of entities, they're going to require you to carry flood insurance on your home as well. So those are the challenges that you're having to face here. One thing to know, I can draw personally from this, year before last, when I got my home renewal, I looked at my coverage A, which is the dwelling amount, and I noticed that, to me, it looked a little bit light for what my local market was in Raleigh. I had to jump through hoops and get an appraisal done on my home so that I could get $40,000 more added to my coverage. Because I just knew that the level they had it at was not in sync with the current market. And that was kind of a fight. I was trying to give my insurance company more money, and they fought me tooth and nail the whole way. Because they said their metric showed it cost us much. So, that's something I would stress everybody. Don't just go off what your tax records say. Kind of check the pulse of the real estate market in the area as well, and make sure you have adequate levels for your dwelling. Here you've got most people, boaters. You may have a dock or an outbuilding pier kind of thing like that. That would be like in other structures kind of situation. You need to have a feel for what that's going to cost to rebuild if you lose that completely. So just, forewarn, knowledge is power in that kind of situation.
And this can go to either Tim or Jessica, but full disclosure, my mom's an insurance agent. So there's that. She's not here in the county, but I know one of the things she always tried to do was explain the options that were available to people. Like at one point too, she have to design a waiver to tell people that she told them about flood insurance and wind and hail, because if a storm happened, often be in a situation where people would come back and say that you didn't talk. But one of the things I ran into a lot more people saying just those things, and there are, I know a lot of people's, you are going through the agent for a lot of this, and there are a lot of great agents. Sometimes that's not always the case. So if you've gone to an agent and maybe still feel confused, either Tim or Jessica, does the Department of Insurance have resources or someone you can call just to get more information about what should or shouldn't be in a policy?
Okay, we have lots of different services. Main number that we have, if you visit our booth over here, you can actually get the card on there. But any kind of insurance question that you have, you actually call the Department of Insurance, and we're there to help you understand it, help you make sure you're getting exactly what you need, and you're not being overcharged, and you're not being double covered. We actually have people in the office that can help you understand and work through that. And you're not going to get a computer. You're not going to call and have to press a bunch of numbers. We actually have live people there who will be willing to help.
And we have different disciplines within my group, which is called the Consumer Services Group. So I'm on the property and casualty side. We have another team that does life and health, and then we have a third team that's called SHIP. It's a Seniors Health Insurance Information Program, and they're there to assist people with Medicare and Medicaid concerns. So we've got a lot of people that have a lot of experience in those different types of insurance.
I wondered, on the double coverage, I don't exactly understand that, but it confuses me that if somebody's roof blows off and their house floods, their flood insurance does not cover that.
Yeah. When a claim is filed, for especially here, you're having a multi-front attack on your property. You've got water coming up from the ground, the flood, and then you've got the wind assault from above. Usually, the insurance company's gonna kind of have to separate the wheat from the chaff and say, you know, okay, your floor, your carpeting, you've got a saturation line that's coming up the wall. The insurance company's gonna look at that and say, that looks like that is flood related. So you're gonna have to go through your flood policy for that. The insurance company's gonna look at anything, you know, that's coming from the sky. So if the corner of your house gets peeled back like a, you know, can of fruit, and you can look out and see daylight, or, you know, the majority of your shingles get blown off, you get, you know, sometimes with these storms, they have enough barometric pressure change, it can crack the glass. You can have that kind of vacuum change in the dwelling. That's what the insurance company is going to be looking at. Because with that, you know, the home policy is a cover peril policy. You know, we all think, well, I have insurance, so I've got everything from hurricanes to lightning to alien invasion to my kid drawing off the house. You know, it is written as a covered peril policy for a very specific reason. In the language of your home policy, you'll see where it has language that says they will repair or replace. The word repair is first for a very specific reason. They'd rather put X number of shingles on your roof than have to do your entire roof. So that's, you know, and that's.
So if the rain did come in and flood your house from above, will it cover that or not?
That
I mean,
would
if you
be-
just had flood insurance.
Yeah, that would really fall to the home insurance carrier's discretion, because, you know, they're going to be looking at the totality of the weather event and say, okay, well, do we have data to show that, you know, in Davis that there was an 18-inch, you know, surge of water that came up and inundated the home from below?
Can I help you out with that?
There you
All
go.
right, so what's the definition of a flood? No. No. Definition of a flood, and this is off the top of my head, haven't Googled it, so give me a second, but the definition of a flood is moving water covering 2 or more properties. So, moving water covering 2 or more properties. The road is a property, and your property is a property. So, if the road and your property are flooded, then that's 2 or more properties. But that is the definition of a natural flood. Then you also have like water backup from wastewater issues. Not a flood. Well, is a flood, but not a flood. It falls under a flood policy, but it doesn't fall under a wind and hail policy, if I'm not mistaken. Correct? Okay. So, definition of a flood. Flood is water moving across the ground. That's a flood. If it's from the roof, that's wind and hail.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
It's plenty to get to you, Ryan, but I know within the flood policy too, I think, you know, I know in what you do now and in your former life is, is you work at the State Hazard Mitigation Office.
I was.
Yes. But also contained in flood policies, there are sort of, maybe I wouldn't call them goodies, but you do have access to other potential programs that are out there, such as potential ICC funding and FEMA as flood mitigation assistance, and just wonder if you could talk a little more about that.
All right, so your flood policies there's various flood policies. If you got a flood policy through an individual assistance program, you highly likely don't have what they call ICC or increased cost of compliance. Increased cost of compliance is a rider with your policy that will help mitigate your house. And actually, private insurance companies are picking up on this as well. So like Lloyd's of London, I think, has an ICC as well. But what that rider does is, if you need to elevate your house to be in compliance with the local flood damage prevention ordinance, then that increased cost of compliance is, I think it's $40,000 right now. There's been talk of moving it up and down, and it kind of ebbs and flows with the Bigger Waters Act. But, and then the repeal of the Bigger Waters and the replacement of it. Anyway, it kind of goes back and forth. But I think it's $40,000 right now. You could use that money to elevate your house. So basically what we would do is we would go and take the foundation out from around it, Because your house, the brick foundation that's on the outside of your house is just a facade. What it's actually sitting on is the piers. Run some steel under it, then we get a jack truck in, jack it up, increase the piers, the height of the piers, drop it back down, put a new foundation around it. So that would be the elevation piece in very simple terms. That would be elevating your house. You could also move it. If you buy another piece of property, you want to just pick that house up and move it down the road, it will help with that as well. Substantial damage, there's some 50% or more value of the property. If it's substantially damaged, you'll have to bring it into compliance with local ordinances. There's a lot that goes into the insurance piece and matching up with the flood damage prevention ordinance. More than I can go through sitting right here right now. But I'm glad to answer questions on it. So I don't know how deep you want me to go right now.
Well, I had a question too, just,
Well, I just, from the three of you, what could the consumer do to be better prepared to make a claim? In other words, what do they need to be doing, I would say before the storm hits anyway, that they can get what you need and move through the process more quickly? And that lady's not here.
Let me ask you a question, kind of poll the audience. Can you get flood insurance right now? Today? Can you go get a new policy today?
Probably not because of there's a name.
Location
out
of that
there.
name,
There's a
proximity to
system out there, yeah.
You can't get a new policy right now. You can't go call the insurance agent and say, I want a new policy.
So that's the number one thing that people do, they try to get one before.
Last Monday, I had a call from a gentleman down in Brunswick County that was like, hey, I need to get a flood policy. Well, the industry, they're tracking that storm, and when it reaches a certain longitude and latitude, it's deemed in the box. And that's when the companies send out a blast to all their agents. Your binding authority is shut down. You cannot write any new policy. And the flood, flood is probably, with a flood policy, there's a 30-day waiting period. So I had to explain that to that guy, and he's like, well, I just need it now. I mean, he wanted it for about 3 days, and then he was going to cancel it. Why? I was like, well, I didn't go to Wharton School of Business, but that's not really a good business model. But he called National Flood Insurance Program and had that
But for those
conversation.
people that do have that, what I'm saying is what would be your dream person that comes in to file a claim? I mean, what could they do to more quickly and better
I tell
access?
everybody before the storm, this is your best tool. Everybody has one of these. If it hits the fan, you're grabbing your keys, you're grabbing your phone, you're grabbing your wallet or purse. Take pictures of your policies. Have them on here. Keep them in the cloud. That way, if everything goes to a handbag, you'll be able to retrieve your documents. When I went to the tornado thing down at Grissetown, the Valentine's tornado a couple years back, I talked to 5 people that didn't even know who their insurance company was for their home. Luckily, they were at the beach, so we called the IUA and said, let's work this in reverse. But, take pictures of, we're getting into the fall holiday season. Everybody's going to get their house put together for Thanksgiving or Christmas. Go through there and take a photo log of your stuff. And not down to your hand towels and the water, soap dispenser, but the big things, your bedroom set, your living room set, your electronics, things like that. And have those memorialized on here. Me as a former claims adjuster, the easier you make it on the adjuster, the faster you're going to go through the process. So if you have your policy information ready, so if you have to call on your policy, it's going to have, hey, this is the 800 number that you need to call to file a claim with the company. And that way, when you call, you can say, this is me, this is my policy number, this is the underwriting company, and then they go ahead and take it from there, get all that information put in. Like I said yesterday, after a big event like a hurricane, I wish companies would move away from telling people, hey, somebody will call you in 24 hours. That's not realistic. They haven't been here. They haven't taken the tone of what, the area looks like to know how soon they can get somebody in. Something else to add is that, Brad said, his mother's an agent. Agents are great resources for kind of soundboarding and asking, questions about, do I have enough coverage? Do I need to add, or is this something I really don't need? But an agent sells and services policies. They do not adjust claims. So once the claim is filed with the insurance company, it's the adjuster that's driving the bus at that point. And I know from the agency side, a lot of people are like, well, I've got this agent right down the road and I'm going to call them because I know them. But they're kind of handicapped in that situation. They kind of have to take a step to the side and let the claims organization take over. So that's a point of contention, because if you have, your local agent that you go to church with, them, you're going to call them, and hopefully, they can call the company and move you ahead in the queue.
And just to go off what he says, I think everybody here probably has gotten a bag off of our table, but wanted to answer your question, we actually have after disaster. It tells you exactly what you need to do, the stuff you need to have to file a claim. It actually tells you what if you don't have the home inventory, what if you forgot to take the pictures or the video before it happens. It tells you the steps here, even down to the point where you've got a log of everybody you talk to just to cover yourself in case questions come out later down the road. You can actually write down the conversation, the time, who you spoke to, the information that you gave them. And again, I know that this is paperwork, and we all have so much paperwork in the house that we tend to put it to the side and forget about it. But if you kind of put it in a to-go bag or bug-out bag, just in case of a hurricane, it's got everything you need, even information on public adjusters. We have a medication assistance program. If you get stuck and you leave your medicine at the house and you forget, we actually have something that can help you with that as well. I mean, there's a bunch of different things that can help.
Are these available as PDFs online as well?
Yeah, you can go to ncdoi.gov, and when you scroll down our homepage, it'll have a picture of hurricane, what to do in a disaster, and you click in there, it'll take you to pretty much all of these links. You can even get to where you've got a printable inventory sheet. You can use that to fill out.
This is a bit of an aside, but it's really important. I see Yvita over here with CLTRA. She was here last night, but I can't emphasize enough, whether it's insurance or, I know we're talking about this as if, everyone's in a position to get insurance. Not everyone is. So for groups like CLTRA, the Baptist, other groups that come through, even state agencies, documenting the damage and what you have is critical. I can't even calculate how much time they spend just trying to get the materials together so people can apply for assistance, whether it's through, again, like church aid groups, local organizations like CLTRA. I know that, I helped a lot of people with in-core applications, same thing. It's just documentation is critical, and I know, I guess I'll mention their name one more time, but I know there are CLTRA has hurricane expos every year around May or June. They have a bunch of free stuff there. They have, they have bags you can put all your documents in. And they had a raffle. They had a grill one year I wanted to win. But so that's the time, even with the flood insurance, I know it's not something that everyone wants to think about, but it's just a reality of life living here, and storms are going to come. And so, trying to set a date early on, whether it's in May or June, to start thinking about that and just getting prepared, even if it just takes a weekend, is something that's critically important, whether it's insurance or any sort of other recovery you would want to do. And if you don't know how to use the cloud, tell people email your pictures to yourself. If you don't know how to do that, text them to yourself. I guess if you don't know how to do that, just don't lose your phone. We did have people that did lose their phones, and they would have things. So it's important to figure out some sort of backup system for those documents as well. Yeah, just documentation is critically important for anything you want to do, and it can really speed up your recovery, or it could slow it down even by years. It's just really important to do that.
I will also throw in there that just because you don't have to have flood insurance doesn't mean you shouldn't get flood insurance. A lot of people don't get flood insurance because they're not in a special flood hazard area or the really bad connotation of 100-year floodplain. 100-year floodplain is not a 100-year floodplain. That is a 1% chance annual flood event. 1% chance. That's like going in and buying 10 scratch-off tickets and winning on one. I mean, or 100 scratch-off tickets and winning on one. There's a pretty good chance you're gonna get that, right? On 100 scratch-offs. All right. So there's a pretty good chance we're gonna have a 100-year flood somewhere in the state or in the country every year. Every year. The gamble is, where is it going to happen? So, it could happen in the western part of the state through flash flooding. It could happen in the central part of the state through flash flooding or a hurricane. It could happen, here from storm surge, or it could happen a combination of storm surge and riverine flooding. The combination of storm surge and riverine flooding is when the water comes in from the ocean, that's storm surge, and then water from the riverine flooding comes down and they meet. They meet somewhere in the middle. With Hurricane Florence, they met somewhere around noon. So having flood insurance, whether you're in a floodplain or not, that's the worst, is having to tell somebody that there's nothing I can do for you because you didn't have flood insurance. Sorry. It just is what it is. We do have, for the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program, which is out right now, so if you're interested, contact Greg Hartman at the county, with Carteret County. He's the one that'll be managing that program. But
What is that program?
getting there. So that program is through the National Flood Insurance Program. There's $80 million in it this year. Nationwide, it is a competitive program. You can, they will do acquisition, elevation. Acquisition is not done in Carteret County, or commissioners will not go for acquisition, so that one is out in Carteret County. But elevation is an option. What you can do is elevate your house above base flood elevation. The problem, if I remember right, from 5 years ago, I think most of this area is not in a 100-year floodplain. I think. We talked about it.
I can look it up.
When you say acquisition, do you mean buyout?
Yeah.
And so the county is just not interested in that in general, or?
Correct.
What's one not interested in? So,
Buyout. So
So it's not an option to its residents, because,
yes.
okay.
Buyout means you can't build back.
Buyout would be an acquisition. So you buy the house out, you tear it down, that property stays open space in perpetuity, and it's owned by the local county.
So is that what they did in Collinsville?
They did some buyouts in Pollocksville.
Bunch
I did
of
27 buyouts in Jones County altogether. Some of them were in Pollocksville, some of them were in Trenton. And that was through the first round of Hurricane Florence.
So they were from willing sellers
Correct.
to sell to the state,
To the county.
to the county.
And then it's kind of like a conservation trust that one goes into?
It is not in a trust. It stays with, there's a deed restriction that's put on the property, so that property cannot be developed again. In perpetuity is the language that goes into it. So you could put a park on it.
Yeah.
You could put a gravel parking lot on it, but it has to
can't
be
build
basically
structure.
pervious surface, or you can use it for a community garden.
Can the county sell it?
No,
Georgia Pitt County Airport.
County and even transfer.
they can sell it, but they can transfer it. They can
And the
transfer
same
it.
provisions follow the transfer?
Come again?
I said those
Yes,
same
yes, yes.
restrictions follow the transfer?
Still limited deed, right?
I'm sorry?
So it's gonna still be with limited deed on it, right?
Yeah, deed restriction. It is deed
Yes,
restricted in
restrictions,
perpetuity
yeah.
forever.
Mm-hmm.
But you did say that the county is interested in doing elevations, that there is money available to do that.
Yes.
So how can people access that?
So that is accessed through Greg Hartman in the planning department for Carteret County. Unless you are in a town, but I don't think there's any incorporated towns out this way. So, yeah, you contact Greg Hartman, tell him you want to get on the list. He's got an application that you fill out, and then they are putting an application together. There is, and I will say that Greg and Jean have been faithful applicants year after year after year for those programs. Every year they put an application together. Every year it goes up to the federal. And most every year that I can remember, it has been funded. So
And I think last year it was for 7 properties.
there is criteria.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of criteria that goes into that. It's not a guaranteed program. There's benefit cost analysis that has to be done. You can use, and I'm getting way into the weeds here, but there's benefit cost analysis that has to be done. You have to show where it's in the floodplain. Then there's cost shares that are involved. Sliding scale cost shares if we're doing an elevation. There are repetitive loss lists. There are severe repetitive loss lists. If you're a severe repetitive loss, and I cannot remember the definition of the two. Severe repetitive loss is 2 or more claims in a rolling 10-year period that exceed $10,000, I think. Is that right?
Probably something like 3 and 20 years. What is 3 and 20 years?
Come again? 3 and 20 is, it's a rolling 10-year period. Everything's a rolling 10-year period with the flood insurance, program. Rolling 10-year period, meaning this is 2023, so 10 years, 2013. Now, if you make it on that list before, you stay on that list. Even if it was from Hurricane Floyd, that starts collecting. Once you make the list, you make the list. Severe repetitive loss is that repetitive loss, and that's 100% federal share. A 90-10 is a repetitive loss, which is one claim totaling $5,000 or less in a rolling 10-year period. That's a 90-10, so 10% cost share. The county is not going to pick up your cost share, so you've got to pick that up as a local, as a homeowner.
But
Just to clarify, we're still talking about FMA, because an FMA is available, if I'm not, you have to have an active flood insurance policy
Yes.
in order to apply for FMA, but I know, I think Karen, you mentioned 7 homes. I think that was under the HMPG program, the traditional.
HMGP.
Yeah.
It could have been.
Yeah, I believe it was. So how does, Ron, how does that differ from the FMA program?
So HMGP is tied directly to a disaster. So it's tied to a disaster.
You mean a disaster declaration?
Correct.
Okay.
So it has to have a federal disaster declaration. Then there's hazard mitigation grant program funds that are made available to the state. There is a formula that we use to get to what that number is. Again, that's way down into the weeds. I'll refrain from that. But there is a formula that is used to get to that number. For Hurricane Florence, I think we were at 150 million, I think is what we got. Does that sound right? And I think for Hurricane Matthew, it was the state got 116 million, if I remember right, for hazard mitigation grant program funds. Those funds they're still a match with those funds. It is a 75-25 match. However, The state, our General Assembly, through legislation, after a disaster, has traditionally, and I say traditionally because they can stop it at any point in time, they have traditionally picked up the 25% match. So homeowners and local governments have not had to pony up the 25%. That is a North Carolina-centric thing. That does not happen in other states. Florida sometimes does, sometimes doesn't, but beyond that, outside South Carolina, Virginia, Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, they do not do that. That does not happen.
I want to get back to the funding that's supposedly available to raise homes through the county.
Okay.
The criteria, where do I find that? Because if I'm doing vulnerability assessments for people, and they might need to justify certain criteria, I'd like to make sure that we're covering all those bases when we do a vulnerability assessment. And every house we've looked at so far is in an A zone. I mean, so that part is clear. But so I just, it would be really helpful for me so that we're not wasting our time when we're doing these vulnerability assessments to know what that criteria is so that we're providing the adequate information for somebody who might want to move forward with accessing that funding. And does the house have to be previously damaged as a part of that criteria?
What can we get to when we have time to think, read over everything? Where's the best source of information?
All right, so that book is really thick. Really thick, like really thick. But that is the Unified Hazard Mitigation Assistance Guidance. You can Google that, UHMA, FEMA UHMA. You can Google it, and it's great nighttime reading because it will put you to sleep. However, there are several appendices within that will talk about elevation and the criteria used for elevation. There is a benefit cost analysis spread. It's an Excel-based application that you can use to understand the benefit cost analysis. The problem with the benefit cost analysis is you will never, ever, ever, ever make an elevation or an acquisition or a reconstruction. You'll never make it cost effective through the benefit cost analysis tool. So what FEMA did to make that happen was they went and created what they call the pre-calculated benefits. So for every house, for every project, there is what they call a pre-calculated benefit. So what you do is you take the pre-calculated benefit for elevation is $205,000 total project cost per unit. So one house, then you take the total project estimate and you divide the total project estimate by the 205. If you get 1 or greater, then you are considered cost effective. If you're under the 1.5 or the 1.0, then it's not cost effective. But then you could turn around and you could aggregate this. So you can get 10 houses. You got one house that's going to cost $500,000. You got another house that's going to cost, you got 5 other houses that are going to cost $100,000 to elevate the total project cost. Then you can aggregate and get a total aggregation of all of 10 houses and make a cost-effective project.
So you can have some houses that are not by themselves cost effective.
Correct.
But other homes can be more cost
Yeah,
effective.
I get that. That's assuming that there's somebody taking the lead on this. Right?
Experience.
And going into the community and proactively helping make this happen, I guess, rather than one individual property owner going after it.
So that's why we encourage, that's why I'm encouraging, if you're interested, because it's voluntary, it's not mandatory, it's voluntary. If a homeowner is interested, you've got to contact Greg Hartman and put your application in. He's one guy trying to cover an entire county. So if he's got an application, he's got the application, he has a consultant on call, or on staff, or on call, that he uses that can put that together, that does it. I do it for Craven County.
Sounds like we need to get him in a room with a bunch of interested people
No, it doesn't sound like that. What it sounds like is you need to actually file an application
Yes.
with Greg Hartman and let him look at the property. What you're doing is he's got to go and pull a bunch of data on that property. His application is going to have a lot of information on it. Cornering him is not going to work for anybody. I can tell you that right now. So, fill the application out if you're interested in the program. You may or may not be able, you have to have an active flood insurance policy. You're going to have to be in an A zone, minimum A zone. What is your BFE? Just because you're in an A zone doesn't mean your house is not already built above the base flood elevation. If we're only moving, if the only thing below elevation is the mechanical, i.e. your HVAC system, there's nothing to elevate. That's a lot of what's down this way. Yes, a lot of things are in the A zone, but the only thing in the floodplain is actually the mechanical. That's it.
The trick is, this is all pretty complicated for an individual homeowner.
It is. That's why you call
Right,
Greg.
they actually do a new program to help.
Okay, let me go out on a limb and say, I'm not gonna mess with this. It doesn't sound like, I'm gonna win this lottery. But I wanna raise my house. I'm not gonna mess with this program. Where do I start?
If you didn't access.
Can I plug myself for a second? Call me.
Okay.
Like, how does one generally navigate the process if they decided they want to raise their home, they don't want to go, like,
It's
do
a
the
Well, the
lottery?
company to
It
go
is a
do it.
complicated process.
Uh-huh.
I mean, even without the lottery,
Yeah.
it's a complicated process.
Are you talking about if you have flood insurance?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's still going to be a complicated process. You're going to have to get an engineer to design your foundation. You're going to have to get a survey and get an elevation certificate to show you what the base flood elevation is, what the lowest adjacent grade, so lowest adjacent grade from the house to the foundation, what that is, and then what the highest adjacent grade is, what the base flood elevation is, what the elevation of the first floor is, so that the engineer can actually go and make a design for how high we're going. Then you're going to have to find a contractor that is experienced in doing elevations, which is actually harder to find than you think it is. Even though it's a simple process, you basically got to take the contractor and make him flip him upside down and look at the house and say, all we're doing is this. It's a hard concept. It really is. They have to have an elevator. They have to have somebody that's experienced in elevation. So they're going to have to run beams underneath the house. So you're going to have somebody to do that. They're going to have to know what to do to cut the mechanical. So your contractor's going to be responsible for a lot of it, but finding one's going to be a problem. You're also going to need some help with, or you're going to have to, as the homeowner, you're going to have to go through the ICC process if you want to try to get that $50,000. But that $50,000 is not going to cover the whole thing.
And I was going to say too, we can, if it's on elevations, we can take one more question, and then there may have a couple of final thoughts from the panelists, because it is something that I can, if people have specific questions, I or Ryan, all of us, we can talk to people about, maybe resources, because I know a big point of this whole event is just trying to, connect people with people who may know the answers to these questions, because Ryan could talk much longer in the meeting about what the elevation process looks like, but because I'm just the attorney, so I tell people. So what is your question?
I'm not discrediting what he's saying at all, but my sister and brother-in-law just raised their house. And the first thing they were told to do, because their neighbors had done it, and they live in Davis, and they went to the planning department to get a permit up. There is a man, I'm not going to get his name or anything, but he said right now he has enough work to employ his guys for 6 years. And most of it has been done in Hyde County, Dare County. He got the permit, contacted this man, he came, he's done enough, he said, okay, I'll tell you what you got to have. He went back to the county, to this department in his department, with Gene Foxworth in the planning department. I'm talking about Carter County. And they told him what he had to have, and it was not that complicated. The problem
the expense of it versus some other people in Davis had applied for these grants that could have paid for it, but they went to the meetings, they filled out the applications. I know one situation, two widows lived across the road from each other. One woman was approved and one wasn't. I don't know the criteria that was missing here, but I didn't know till later that the one lady was able to get the grant and it paid for raising her house completely with the foundation and all those things. Where my brother-in-law and sister have, put in a new foundation, paid for all of that, because that is separate from the guy that raises the house. He raises it, he leaves, you hire a brick mason, they fix all of that according to what the permit states, and your utilities and everything. And it's what you're willing to pay, because they're in their 50s, they're like, we don't deal with this anymore. But they were not flooded in the house, but so was that other widow. She was not flooded in the house, but then they knew in the next storm it would be their ductwork was flooded. But I don't understand the whole hazard mitigation. I used to work with emergency management with Mike Atherton in Carter County for years. And they did a huge project on Laurel Road. If you go on Laurel Road in Maryland, you see all these mobile homes that have the wraparound porches. That was all free. It was funded through the government. But people that have flood insurance and that, I hate to say, I don't sound bad about that, but you're paying your bills and everything, it was harder to get. A lot of these people did not have flood insurance, so it was like a block grant or something done according there. But it funded raising these houses or bought new mobile homes and things because they knew it was going to cost them more money in the long run, like you were saying here, that cost-benefit analysis.
And there's, okay, yeah, and the thing, it can be, I'll try to see if I can find a sheet that has all of this laid out. There's 4, you could be dealing with 4 different programs, 5 different programs. Elevation is not elevation, that sounded like a block grant.
Yeah, I think that was a block. There was several after Hurricane Floyd. Is that when that was?
Yeah.
Yeah, there were several like supplemental programs that came in after and did it more like a block grant did. That's kind of referred to as CDBGDR now, disaster recovery, but it's essentially Congress's way of funneling funds directly to a state. So they can earmark funds through CDBG program to a state for a certain thing, and that's what that was.
But the program you're talking about now, contacting Greg Hartman, is that going to be based on your income and those things?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. CDBG is income based.
No,
Hazard mitigation grant programs, FMA, they are not income based.
But they'll pay for all of that, and you don't have to try to get that $30,000 ICC thing from your flood insurance to pay for that.
If it's hazard mitigation grant program, yes. If it's FMA, no.
And that's why I think having a sheet where, and I'll try to get it so you can read it off. And one of the things I would, and I know this would happen a lot of times when I was in communities too. I was thinking specifically about FEMA IA assistance. People would tell me all the time, they're like, well, my neighbor said they got $100,000 from FEMA. No one gets $100,000 from FEMA. I think now they're, and I know a nice lady I talked to last night brought up after I spoke that FEMA, helped her actually repair her roof and get her all the way back, which is the case, but I think it was, an under $10,000 repair. I think most recent flooding in Vermont, the maximum IA grant is up to $41,000 now. The average payout was around $6,000. So, but with all that, I'll work on getting some materials to the group. How much? We got? Okay, so 7 minutes. So, now my head's spinning. I'll look at stuff now. But with that, I didn't have any. If
Jason told me to take it easy.
Huh? Yeah.
I had 2 other things to add before I came down. Karen had tasked me with, she asked if there were any property and casualty carriers that had pulled out of North Carolina coastal area. And I checked on that. We haven't had any that pulled out. We've had 2 companies that have been declared insolvent though. We've got United Property and Casualty and lighthouse insurance that have been declared insolvent and are going through receivership. So those are two, and they kind of jumped in here maybe after, Matthew, they kind of jumped into the North Carolina market, hoping to write policies, and knock on wood, had no major event, and Florence manifested herself, so I think that kind of drove both of those companies.
So Nationwide is still here?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I saw, like, the
I
Washington,
noticed that it was.
I thought in some counties only, though. In some counties, yeah. They,
This is boarding property.
Yeah, I didn't get anything from our property and casualty division stating anything about Nationwide pulling out of coastal North Carolina.
I'll go back.
If you have a specific letter from them, I'd be more than happy to look at that and see if I can kind of decipher that. And I could go to the company and inquire further on that. The other thing I wanted to bring up, a couple years back, Commissioner Causey kind of beseeched insurance industry to come up with an alternative to having to get flood insurance. So we have one company that has stepped up to the plate to write flood insurance. It's called Incline Casualty. So any incline casualty. So if you go to a local agent, they can explain to you the nuances of that, write your own option, and see if you can get a little better price going through them. I mean, it's been flood insurance. It's going to be, it's not going to be very cost effective. I'll be honest with you, but it is an alternative to having to go through the National Flood Insurance.
And does anyone else have any other questions? I know there's been
Sorry. I was just going to ask, where do you see FEMA going? I mean, they can't continue like they are with all the disasters that are happening. Where do you see that ending up?
there's legislation right now in Congress that's making some adjustments.
That what?
Just making some adjustments to FEMA and how they operate. Where it goes is still kind of up in the air, but I have seen some legislation that's backing off, like cost shares. Thresholds are going up to get a declared disaster. So there's got to be, every state has a threshold as to what per capita, and the thresholds seem to be going up. So it's going to be harder to get a disaster declaration, which just means it's going to put it back on the state, or there may or may not be any assistance available.
Oh, I was just going to ask, kind of what are the, like for North Carolina, what are kind of like the general implications for the insurance companies that hold like out Florida? Or also, thinking about, I know we're not Florida, but even just thinking about if you're in the middle of a third mortgage and you can't get homeowners insurance, what does that kind of mean?
Well, home insurance is not required by any insurance law for North Carolina. A mortgage company will put that burden on you because they want to protect their interest in the loan balance on the property. So,
yeah, I mean, I know in some of the, I think it's State Farm and Nationwide pull that in California. They can, all parts of part of it, I don't think they exactly statewide. But yeah, I mean, I know that recently few people I work with, they have family that are actually down in Florida. With Idalia coming through, and they had the homeowners, I think someone's mother had their homeowners insurance policy canceled and couldn't find them. Literally couldn't find them. So I don't know what the solution to that would be. I think some states have looked at trying to, I guess it's legislatively entice companies to come back. I know some places will put sort of a ceiling on the kind of rates you can charge, but I know those states too. I think California in the last month or two has had, what haven't they had? So they've had a hurricane, wildfires, earthquakes, locusts, yeah. It's, and so it's one of those, honestly don't know. Jessica.
Just before we get done with that time, I did want to mention this too, just because we don't want there to be a hurricane that hits you, but if there does happen to be a hurricane that comes through here, and you are looking for assistance, and you're not sure what to do, and you're not sure where your insurance papers are, you don't have an agent to contact immediately, we actually, the Department of Insurance has a victim assistance center that comes out into the area. It ain't gonna be the day after the hurricane, because we may not be able to get in, but maybe a few days after, we'll actually bring in an assistance center that is housed by DOI employees and also by our criminal investigations division, because one of the things that happens is after a disaster, you get contractors or roofers, and they'll come in here and they'll tell you, okay, well, look at your roof, some of your shingles are missing, we'll file it on your insurance, and then they'll end up charging insurance a ridiculous amount of money, or you don't really need it, you just need a couple of shingles replaced, and then that also is going to drive up the cost of insurance, and you will get scammed. So we actually have a victim assistance center that comes in here, and you can come out to the trailer, wherever we sit it, we'll be in contact with the county on where to put it. And then we'll help answer any questions, we'll help file the claims, and we'll also have our officers out there to assist as well. Just a piece of information for you in the case that we do have a hurricane.
You have to be careful of the contractors. Anyone got to get the Secretary of State's website. It's always interesting to type in a company name and see when they were incorporated. If they've incorporated within a month of a storm, I'd watch out. So, I mean, do your vetting. They could be legitimate, but that's something that I ran into a lot. They were always really nice, too. Yeah, I know we're like a minute over, so we're getting out of here, but thank you everyone for your questions, and thank you to all the panelists for being here.